Jennifer was very kind to give me that introduction, but I have the pleasure of being joined by my fellow panelists who will introduce themselves, starting with Isabel.
Hi, I'm Isabel Ziegler, and I'm the Supervisory Museum Curator for 4 National Park Service sites that are here in the San Francisco East Bay, and they include Rosie the Riveter World War II Homefront National Historical Park, John Muir National Historic Site, Eugene O'Neill National Historic Site, and Port Chicago Naval Magazine National Memorial.
Hi, good morning. I'm Gerard. I'm an architect with over 28 years of experience. I'm a vice president with Marx Okubo and I co-manage the San Francisco office. And I was very fortunate to recently work with WWII and Spurck on the facilities condition assessment for SFMOMA. Fun fact about me, I love museums. So I did it great. So, this assignment was probably the coolest assignment I've done.
Good morning, I'm Kathleen Spurck. I've been an architect for over 35 years. I'm the vice president in the Denver office of Marx Okubo. So we thought we'd start out today by explaining or defining what is a facilities condition assessment. I'm going to call it an FCA. David, Gerard, and myself, we're going to talk about a facilities condition assessment in terms of medium to large scale museums. And typically that means a third-party team of specialists, including architects, structural engineers, fire life safety, accessibility, come in and do a review of the facility. Then Isabel, she's going to talk about smaller museums. They've developed systems and lists and guidelines for in-house reviews of assessments for their facilities. So we're going to give you kind of the 2 different versions of facility condition assessments. So what is a facility condition assessment? So it's really a review of the building components and systems. What condition are they in? Are they in good condition, fair condition, poor condition? What's the remaining useful life of the materials? And then a cost is associated with the repairs, the replacement of those materials within a 10, 12, 15-year term. And this really allows the museums to budget, finance for a duration of time and not have some unexpected costs come up to the best of their knowledge. So we all know museums pose a really unique demand on building systems. They run 24/7. You need to have redundancy in systems to protect the collection in case something goes down. And various collections require different humidity, different temperature, different light. And then budgets for museums are really tight. They want to spend money on a collection. They don't want to spend money unwisely on repairs and maintenance and systems. So an FCA can do more than just identify the condition of a system. What we like to do is help museums understand how you can extend useful life of your building systems. Through repair, maintenance, sometimes if you can get a roof at a certain amount of time in its life, you can coat the roof instead of repairing it down the road. So how can we use our budgets wisely for museums? FCAs, what we found in the past too, they can bring stakeholders together to prepare a document that really plans for a museum in the next 10, 12 years. Authorship is provided by all the stakeholders. There's buy-in. There's an understanding of what needs to happen with a museum 10 to 12 years down the road. So the process and approach for a facilities condition assessment is really 4-phased. And the 2 phases are the most critical: discovery and analysis. So what you put into a facilities condition assessment is what you're going to get out in the end. So looking at drawings, discovering information about your museum, what's historical, what's not historical, what's new, observing the building, meeting with the stakeholders, understanding what the shortcomings are, understanding what some upgrades need to be. Walking the building is where we get a lot of information with the stakeholders and facilities people. What kind of condition is it in? And then we put together costs based on all of that information. We developed with our system that's, we put together for 40 years, local contractors, develop costs for each one of those items, work with the stakeholders on what are the priorities for your facility. And then we budget within that 10, 12 years what can happen for the museum. Provides a roadmap for the building and also sets standards. And then there's feedback, it's incorporated into the final process. So we've worked on some national museums around the country, one being New York MoMA in Manhattan. We looked at their existing facility prior to the addition to New York and opened up to see how the existing facility systems could be brought up to speed. We also worked on a historical PS1 in Long Island, which had its own issues being a historical building. We've also worked on storage facilities, their film studio in Hamlin, in Queens. We've also worked on SFMOMA recently that we're going to get into. So Gerard's going to go over a little bit of the timeline of what a facilities addition assessment will take. But also Gerard, myself, and I will review SFMOMA and the process. What did a facility addition FCA provide for SFMOMA? How is it being used? What are the benefits?
So we decided to use SFMOMA as a case study because guess what? You're sitting in the university, right? So it's a great case study here. You heard Kathleen talk about the process. And so one of the things that I want to touch on a little bit is the time. Right? So the amount of time, so if you look at that facilities condition assessment, right, as an investment in the future of the museum, right? The benefits and the values that you are going to get out from it are directly related to the amount of time that you spend on this whole assessment. Right? Okay, so your team that's doing assessment is going to be trying to do this in a very active and operational environment. And you all guys, you all run museums, you all know what that means, right? So you're going to have galleries that are active, you're going to have galleries that have been taken down, been set up, you have conservation going on at the same time, curation, you have your museum patrons moving through the building, and your team is going to have to operate within the environment. So planning is key, right? It's really, really important that you work in a very collaborative manner with your team and the museum stakeholders, right, in getting this done. Okay, it's a collaborative effort. So to give you a rough idea of the timeline for facilities condition assessment, it can run you anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. In the case of SFMOMA, it was 6 months. Okay. So in the simplest form, you could have a professional team come up and just assign them to look at your facility, just look at the building, right? And so, you do that, look at the physical conditions, come up with a report, bang it out in a few weeks, but, there's going to be a lot of stuff they miss, right? Or you could take the way MoMA and SFMOMA did, in this case, they gave us 2,500 documents to review, right? That's plans, specifications, external reports. That's a heavy lift. That's a lot of stuff for us to review.
Yeah, there's MODA, the existing historical building, and some of the addition. Those were brought together.
There's a lot of information, right? And we also understand that not all museums keep a good record. Some may have some drawings or documents, and some may not have anything at all. And so when they don't have anything, then we have to do research. We have to search for the information. Go to the city, you go to the previous architects or the contractors, and you try to pull information, and that takes time. So again, like I said, the amount of time you put in it is going to, generate a lot of value, right?
Gerard, if I could add to that, the amount of documents is no joke. One of the things that I want to stress at this point is that today we're trying to give you a sense of the scale of an FCA. I think Isabel is going to talk about tools that are available online for you to help you get started. But the process is the important part, whether or not you have a consultant or whether or not you're trying to do it yourself. So gathering all of those documents, those historic documents, your original plans, your design narratives, all of that to get back to, okay, how is it supposed to work versus how is it working
And what's so critical is that it creates that plan for 10, 12 years, some certainty as to, where you need to budget, where you need to prioritize, your museum's finances for, protecting your collection and protecting your facility.
And the documents are great, right? It's really, really helpful to us, but the best information you're going to get, and it's a veritable gold mine, is your facility staff, your stakeholders, and so, it's going to talk a little bit about the engagement with stakeholders.
I think the ability to bring together members of departments that rely on the facility to be able to deliver the mission is important. Not only for the factual and the data part of it, but I think we're at a case in point where we had a chief engineer that was here for 25 years and then left last summer, and that process of they're actually just going through the FCA has left us with this historic document of all, everything that's buried in the back of a closet here. We've also found it valuable to have stakeholders as part of the process because they end up being champions for the end product. They understand not only the overall needs of the facility, but it also puts into perspective their needs in the bigger picture, in the larger scheme of things.
So one of the things you can see in this slide here is, our team's walking through the spaces with stakeholders. So while we hold meetings and workshops with the stakeholders to pull as much information as we can for them, you can't do away without this. Walking the space is probably the most important thing we're going to do together with stakeholders. Because while they can bring in notes and the memories and all that kind of stuff to a workshop and a meeting, when you walk the space, as they walk into it, they remember stuff that they forgot about. It's, oh yeah, by the way, that door is leaking, right? And when we walking through the space, we see stuff also like, this is the double height space that you see me looking down into, and that's in the conservation. And I'm looking at the fuel hood, and I see that the shroud's missing. Right? So I'm telling, hey, the shroud's missing. You should have come with it. So there's this sharing of information that's going back and forth, and that's actually where your value is in the sharing of this information. Yeah. And David had mentioned Jeff, and Jeff is a great resource. Chief building engineer, been with the SFMOMA for about 20 years or something like that. So when he downloaded all the information, it was all in his head. We captured it, so we have notes, it's all in the reports, right? And a lot of stuff is captured in the cost. So when he retired, and when David brought in his replacement, we came down, we sat down with his replacement, and we shared some of the information. So if you think about it, the facilities condition assessment is like a living document, right? It's going to continue to grow with the life of the firm. And it becomes a long-term relationship for us. So picking your consultants, because you're going to be working there, so you kind of hope that you kind of like them.
Mechanical engineers that we have, just checking out all the pumps. We've got fire life safety, accessibility. So all these items are looked at and reviewed at the same time.
So all of that's all key in gathering the information so that we can actually use that information to start developing our cost tables, right? So that's the whole point, is you need that cost table so that you can develop that.
Well, what's important with that too is that the cost table reflects, right now, costs are crazy. There's escalation, there's material costs that are just hard to really imagine at this point. So your capital costs and these costs that we come together really need to be realistic for the time, which we're finding difficult right now. But so we concentrate a lot on what are those costs.
I mean, we have a cost database that's about 40 years old, so we utilize that. We also use RS means, and in many cases, especially, and we'll talk to that later on, some pretty complex issues, we would talk directly with contractors. And when we put this our cost table together, It was before COVID. So, about a year ago, I called David and said, hey, the market's changing. Because COVID, material shortages, logistic issues, we kind of need to refresh that cost table. So we came back, we had a few meetings, we walked through the buildings to look at some of the changes, and then we recaptured that. So what I was saying about the FCA being a living document, that's what's going to happen.
Hi, as I said in my introduction, I'm the Supervisory Museum Curator for 4 smaller National Park Service sites. So we protect and preserve the stories of Americans on the home front during World War II, naturalist John Muir, American playwright Eugene O'Neill, and the memorial for the victims of the devastating World War II disaster at Port Chicago. So we're just 4 small sites of over 420 units in the National Park Service across the country, most of which have museum collections. And due to budget restriction and space, many of our museum collections are stored in historic buildings, smaller, just almost makeshift, like where can we put museum collections in stuff that already exists at the parks? So the Department of the Interior and the National Park Service have developed different assessment tools for staff at each Park Service unit to do themselves. And I'm going to share those with you, and those are things that are available for you to use if you're a smaller museum or maybe don't have the budget yet to hire an outside firm to help you with that. So just like we were talking about the benefits of facility condition assessments, they help us document and evaluate museum procedures and operations. So these checklists maybe go a little bit more into the museum side of like how staff are dealing with collections, but also definitely the facilities that you're in. And they help assess your building conditions and the ability to protect and preserve the museum collections. They're a planning tool to determine program needs and facility needs, both short and long term. And they help you develop and prioritize funding requests. The National Park Service units, all the parks have base funding, but then we kind of compete with all the other parks in the nation for special projects each fiscal year. So one of the tools that we have is the Department of Interior checklist for spaces housing museum property. This has kind of recently changed. We had a National Park Service specific one, but now we're going to one that's for the Department of Interior in general. But basically there's 2 versions. There's a Word document and an Excel spreadsheet you can use. I did bring a few printed copies in the back there along with some other handouts about our parks if you're interested. But I can also provide the link for this, or I mean a digital copy if you want to email. The cards are back there too. But basically, there's 4 tabs in this checklist, and so they help you go over policy, which are different plans you should have for your facility, like emergency evacuation plans, integrated pest management, that kind of thing, to make sure you have all of your plans that you need. Then there's 2 tabs, one for exhibit spaces and one for storage spaces, that are going to go through things like environmental controls. How are you doing with your emergency management, your security, your fire protection, your housekeeping, your records handling and preservation. And then there's also a tab for administrative office spaces in case you have some offices that happen to house museum collections. And so what you do is go through different questions under each of these tabs, and you're able to rate yourself from 0 to 4. So you may fulfill some of the obligations for each of the questions, but not all of them. So this is nice, it's letting you kind of determine. So if you're fully deficient, you're going to give yourself a 0 rating. If you have no deficiencies, you give yourself the top rating of 4. But if you have, say, minor deficiencies, it's 3, moderate deficiencies 2, and major deficiencies 1. So you can go through each question, mark down your rating, and then in the comments rate, why you have the deficiency. And then there's a place for how much money would it cost to fulfill that or to eliminate the deficiency. And so at the end, if you go through on the Excel spreadsheet, you go back to the front tab, and it helps you determine overall how much money you would need to correct all the deficiencies in the different areas, and then the total. And then it also, with your scoring, gives you sort of a percentage. So is your facility in good condition? Are you 70 to 100% in line, or are you fair, 50 to 69%, or poor? So this can help you just get a general sense. of your facilities and help you with your planning. And then we also have what's called the NPS Museum Risk Assessment Worksheet. And so this goes through similar topics that the other one did, but it goes in much more detail. And this is available online in the National Park Service Museum Handbook, Part 1, Chapter 10. So you can go in there. The Museum Handbook, if you're not familiar with it, is just a great resource anyway on museum management in general. But so this goes into much more detail. And the nice thing about this, there's for all these different topics, there's a different tab. And so at the top will be questions that your curatorial staff can answer about how the museums are managed. And on the bottom are questions for your facility managers to answer that are more about like the building, like how problems might have with the roof or the windows. And we recently were going through this on our John Muir site and spoke with our museum staff, our facility maintenance worker who'd been there like 30 years. So she knew everything. We were saying like the helpfulness of having these discussions and getting this information. And then for this one, you can't rate yourself a percentage. It's mainly a yes or no. But the nice thing is if you answer no on something and it's considered critical, we'll automatically note that it's a critical deficiency, so you better pay attention to that. Otherwise, you can rate yourself, high, medium, low in terms of prioritization. You can rate yourself for schedule, like is this something you want to correct immediately or intermittent or long-term. You can identify who will be responsible for this. And then the estimated cost as well, and a place for notes. And then the also nice thing about this one is it links to our museum handbook I was mentioning. So related to whatever that topic is, you can go and look at it if you want to see what standards are out there, at least the National Park Service. But so these are some tools that again you guys can do. If you have a smaller site and you want to just start doing self-assessments.
So you're in San Francisco, you're away from your facility for a couple of days. And you're also away from that long laundry list of deficiencies in the building, right? The things that you need to get to. For us, the FCA serves as a catalog of all of that information. It is hard to carry, as you all know, that much information, and it's hard to actively prioritize what needs to get done next. And usually what needs to get done next is that email waiting for you in the morning about how the roof is leaking again, or there's a trouble in the fire system. So what it's done for us is it's just taken this massive amount of issues, if you will, in the building, that many of which are decades old, and it allows us to put it into one document. In our case, it's over 200 pages long, so thousands of items. But to get to that cost table, and Kathy and Gerard talked a little bit about this, it's the process of getting to that final list. The list not only has items, but it also schedules them out 10 years. And that was something that we actively participated in deciding, okay, this is a higher priority. The director sees this as a higher priority, so maybe we need to move it from year 8 to year 2. But it's not, it's a roadmap. It's not, what I had to get over is, we have about $1 million of CapEx that we can spend every year. And our total for 10 years was 18 million. You do the math to figure out you can't do it all, right? And that million that we get every year is split over multiple departments. What it allows us to do is to really see, okay, here are things that are beyond end of life. Here are things that are about to have catastrophic failure. Those things we need to find a fix for. And the costs that are assigned to them by a consultant are usually replaced or usually full repair. But in talking to our engineering teams, there are quite a few creative ways of extending the life of things. So as the roadmap, you're able to then start shuffling things around, saying, okay, a couple more years on that chiller. Let's push that out, which gives us room in the next couple of years to focus on other things. The other advantage of the cost table and its summary is it helps me in particular communicate to my building committee, to our executives in the museum, of really the scope of the need on the facility and operations side. So it's a useful tool there. And it also offers an opportunity, next slide, for us to bring new light to old problems. And this is the iconic Oculus of the Boda building. Because of its design, it is a very difficult set of glazing to maintain. We didn't have a building management unit at that time, so it was very hard to reach the surfaces of the BMU. But because it was incorporated into the cost schedule, and because we have photos up close of what it looks like, in reviewing our FCA, it sort of surfaced it as an opportunity. And for us, that opportunity was looking at it and having our philanthropy department look at it and say, well, maybe there are alternative ways to fund that repair. It's offered an opportunity for our director and curatorial to say, hey, wait a minute, this could be a really cool art commission, opening up other doors for funding.
Yeah, if you think about it, it is an iconic element, right? It's 145 feet from the lobby floor to the top of the skyline. It's about 30 to 40 feet in diameter. So it's pretty big. There's not a lot of people who can repair or rebuild or replace a skyline like this. So, there's more that goes to it than just replacing it, because you have to think about how you're going to get materials out there. So that that requires crane, road closures, right? Pedestrian protection. How do you keep the museum open while you do a large construction project like that? So that's going to need some kind of dance floor, scaffolding underneath the skyline. So all in all, you just heard David talk about this $1 million a year budget. The cost to replace the skyline itself was about 1.8 million, and the ancillary cost, the road closures and all that kind of stuff, was another 800K. So this process about thinking about the skyline as an art opportunity, I think is a fantastic idea. And you don't get to those kind of solutions until you have this kind of roadmap that you can look at to then start thinking outside the box.
So $1.8 million problem causes you to be creative. I've been thinking about going up there with Mr. Clean magic pads and seeing if I can buff out dancing. I think it's just an example, and there are several in our FCA of big problems that seem unsurmountable until you start to share them around the museum. It's been great to have the opportunity to share our FCA with you, and whether or not you're going to do it full blown, working with a consultant, or using tools like those that Isabel presented you. We hope that if you don't have one, that you are going to look back now and consider either developing an FCA or developing a CapEx schedule for the next 5 or 10 years. We are a little ahead of schedule. You're welcome to.